have Jessica, who says, I like the panel that you have this morning, very objective, and this is what we need for Kenya. Well, keep your comments coming. We'll continue reading them as we go along. But let's get into reviewing the week. And of course, one of the biggest topics that we've had this week, or the biggest headline that we've had literally throughout the week, was that advisory by the Chief Justice for Parliament to be dissolved. The advisory was to the President, and there was waiting with bated breath to hear what the President was going to say. But the development on that so far is the CJ's advice has been suspended, and this is by Judge Weldon Korir yesterday, and he says that it is important to observe that it is of public interest not to subject the country to parliamentary election before exhaustively interrogating the constitutionality of the CJ's decision. Let me start with you, David Osiani. First of all, with the fact that Parliament failed Kenyans by virtue of the fact that two-thirds gender bill has not passed, despite the fact the 5 years that had been given within the Constitution for them to have it done had already gone by, and actually another 5 years. So we are 10 years into the Constitution. That still has not been done. Bringing about what now the Chief Justice was forced to do and advised constitutionally to have Parliament dissolved. Let me just start maybe with your thoughts on that particular development. David.
Thank you, Mike. Now, Parliament, 6 times people went to court to try and compel Parliament to find a way of effecting this particular clause. And 6 times judgment was given and rulings were given in favor of the people who went to court, which was attempting to compel Parliament to find a mechanism of meeting this particular bit of the law, of the Constitution. And all these times, Parliament just did not care one single whiff. I actually think that they have invited this upon themselves, and they will have to deal with it should the courts rule that this is the way to go. Remember that the Chief Justice has only done what he is bound to do by law. What he did was his clerical job. It's not even his legal job. He didn't do it he didn't give a ruling. He just did his clerical job. We've gotten here. I have all these rulings by the same High Court, including the one that Justice Weldon Korir sits in. But now, on the flip side, I think this particular clause makes a case for why BBI may be useful for the country. Now it makes sense to those who may not have seen it, that there are sections of the law that may be problematic, not because the intention was entirely, frivolous, but because there were sections of the law that were great, David, but were not well thought through in terms of the ultimate implementation.
Just to pause you there a little bit, how does BBI come in? Because one, it is within the law that the two-thirds gender bill should have been passed. This is just outright failure of Parliament. Really, there is no excusing it.
Mike, the law did not explain how this is to be achieved, especially in a fundamentally patriarchal or patrimonial society as ours, where the ladies themselves, even put to a vote, will vote for men thinking men are better leaders than women. The affirmative action, an attempt to have the affirmative action, like creating the women reps, like creating nominations, have not yielded fruit when most of these people who are nominated are subjected to the vote. Why? Because we have a cultural problem of being a patriarchal society. Therefore, the law should have envisaged the possibility of not achieving the two-thirds gender rule, and in that same vein, recommended ways and means of achieving that. Now, what is available to the Parliament right now is to attempt to do what has happened at the county assemblies level of filling up the remaining positions by nominating the women.
All right.
They did not build consensus, hence, this was entirely their failure. That is why I say that when I talk about, for example, BBI, I know it's a topic that some love, some loathe. However, it is some of these things that I hope to meet when we recommend a referendum, that we are recommending to solve some of these major problems that were well-intentioned but have not been well thought out in terms of implementation.
All right, David, allow me to pause you there because we need to hear from the rest. Let me bring in Gloria. Gloria, your thoughts on this, and is BBI really the solution that we're looking for to solve and amend some of these problems that we have?
So unless David Osiani has the original BBI that we are yet to see, the one that should be released, because it's such a big mystery, a myth, we don't know why we have not gotten it. But according to the one that was released in Bomas, the one that we read, the one that we went in detail as the civil society, what BBI mentions is, it mentions, for instance, in page 54, that, you know, political parties will be compelled to act according to the constitution to ensure that we have gender parity. In an instance where they're talking about inclusivity, they mention, I think it's around page 108 or something, they say something like, you know, women leaders would like to be part of the leadership, blah, blah, blah. It also does not have a clear pathway on how to get to that two-third gender. So to say that BBI will solve our problems, it's like, have you read that document, David?
I have just said that I hope BBI gives us a pathway, Gloria. I hope it gives us a pathway. I look forward to that.
A pathway is also what we have with the Constitution to a detailed level of how we should implement the two-third gender.
Tell us that. So, tell us what the Constitution says, Gloria. No, you're not getting away with this. Tell us how the Constitution proposes an achievement of the two-thirds gender rule. Tell us the roadmap.
I think I should have my time because David has spoken.
All right. Okay. Let me regulate. Another minute, Gloria, because I also want to bring in Mark. I can tell he's burning to say something.
Itching.
But Gloria, kindly, David, allow Gloria to finish.
As I complete my thoughts, this is my position with BBI. It's a very document that doesn't have really defined ways on how we can institute and get to that two-third gender rule. And our constitution has given us a clear definition of where we should be. And what you're seeing happening now is that we are being told, as parliament, you have to take this seriously. You've been pushing it aside. You've been, you know, taking it as something as a by the way. And here's the constitution. We have to abide by it.
Okay.
Now, David Osiani and my colleague might not agree with me because they are pushing for this agenda, but maybe it's because they've seen that PPI where...
All right, Gloria. They're here, they'll speak for themselves. Mark Bichachi, your thoughts on what the CJ did and what that speaks to us as Kenya and what we need to do to ensure that we are not in a constitutional, problem like we are likely to face in this case.
I am tickled. I am very tickled that the Constitution is very clear on how two-thirds should be implemented, and we cannot cite a single example. Now, this is the truth of the matter. The two-thirds gender rule is important. It is important that we find equal or balanced representation, at least on both genders, in every sphere of government. Now, here is the problem. When it comes to parliamentary positions, these are democratic positions, and you cannot force the people of Kenya to vote in certain constituencies women and certain constituencies men. That will go against the very principles of democracy. And I dare say part of the reason why Parliament has been unable to pass this particular law is because there's no logical way of doing it without a constitutional amendment. Now that is just the basic reality, because whether you look at it in the perspective that if you find that after an election a certain gender is below a third, then you need to nominate, then you need to amend the constitution and say how many people you can nominate, because the current number of parliamentarians, if you look at this parliament and the former parliament, you will realize that even if everyone nominated women, we would not have a third women in parliament. So there is something fundamentally wrong in the wording of our constitution, not in the desire of what the constitution had, but how it's been worded. It's impossible to fix. Now you can emotionally do outbursts and say we are being unfair, but that's just the reality of it all. And I'm speaking to Kenyans that it is not something that you will come up and wake up and say, I feel like it should be there. The practical route towards it is not there, which is why I fundamentally disagree with the kind of mischievous lawfare that our Chief Justice is playing. Because we must understand it is not enough to rule according to the law. You must rule and ask yourself, is the action I am taking, clerical as it may be, is it going to deliver a solution to the Kenyan people?
Although, Mark, allow me to pause you there, because with what the Chief Justice did, he's purely following the Constitution. We cannot fault him for that. He's just doing his job.
Mike, that is where you are wrong. Yes, we can, because he took 3 years to get here. His decision is 3 years late. He's basing his decision off of something.
The reason why we cannot do that, Mark, is because he has done his job, and it is causing us to think and introspect and ask ourselves the question, which is important.
Mike, I like to debate with the host anytime, but let me put it in perspective. Judgments of any kind can be questioned. And my question to him is this: if you took 3 years to get here, why was it urgent today? It was urgent today because of his own timeline. It has nothing to do with the Kenyan people. Number two, why didn't he take the time to alert the speakers of parliament and say, listen, this is what I'm going to do? Because we do not live in bubbles, and constitutionalism is not equal to anarchism. Just because you're doing the legal thing does not mean you're doing the right thing.
All right.
And the right thing in this country, let me
it has to be action.
Give me 30 seconds. Let me tell you this. The best way to solve this problem of gender representation and youth representation and all of those things is to move to a mixed member parliamentary system where people vote for a party list, and that way we are able to democratically apply the 2/3 gender rule.
All right, your 30 seconds is over.
Mike, allow me to say...
Yes, David. And please restrict it to a minute, because we're running out of time. David?
I do not think that the Chief Justice was wrong or being mischievous, as Mark would want to put it, and wondering why 3 years, because I would argue that he gave Parliament 3 years to try and figure this out, and there was no movement, there was nothing going on. And so, whereas his ruling may not be palatable, whereas it might not be politically correct, I don't think it would be fair to fault him as being wrong or mischievous, okay? He just did what he had to do. And I bet that having done what he had to do will give us a solution. Either Parliament will follow by itself to make recommendations to the law, or they will just have to go home and rethink this afresh, and maybe BBI will save them. Like I said, BBI is not the solution to this, but there needs to be a change of law. It could be done at Parliament level. It could even be done in a referendum, whichever way it is done. The reason we don't have the same crisis at the county assembly level is because the Constitution clarified how to meet the 2/3 gender threshold at the county assembly level. It, however, did not speak to the same at the National Assembly or the parliamentary level.
Okay.
So that said, I support what Maraga has done. He's just done his job. That is what he ought to do, because sometimes you will need to push the country for them to achieve what is best for themselves.
Gloria?
Mike, I think the narrative that I've been hearing all week, when starting to question the intent of the Chief Justice and not looking into, what his advisory is, it's escapism. It's because you understand that the advice he's giving needed, is because you understand that the advice he's giving to the president must be acted on and is constitutional. So because you cannot win that argument, you then come to studio like Mr. Bichache and start questioning the intent of the advice. So I think if we approach it from that direction, we will not make any headways. And the end game of this whole thing is to reach the 2/3 gender rule. Now, dissolution of parliament, I agree. It's not necessarily going to be the solution in terms of reaching the 2/3 gender rule, because even if we go into a by-election, how then do you institute that within that by-election, we still get the 2/3 elected women leaders or male leaders, whoever. So what we should be having a discussion now is about, once the president heeds the advice, constitutionally so, by the Chief Justice, what then during the by-elections? In fact, I was hoping that Mark Bichache and David Osiani will tell us what ODM and Jubilee are now working on in terms of party level to ensure that the people they nominate for the by-elections are intentionally trying to meet the two-third gender rule, instead of coming to studio to argue of the intent of the advice that has been given.
And we are really running out of time. So Mark Bichache...
It would have been good. It would have been good for Gloria to tell us what Tanga Tanga is planning in that regard. However, I need to say that we really hope that the Constitution, that we will find a constitutional way of resolving the gender crisis, which is a hallmark of successful democracies.
All right, Mark, as we get to the tail end, your conclusion and maybe just closing remarks.
Number one, let's stop people from not criticizing the Chief Justice. He is not God, he is not infallible. And just the same way Gloria can sit there and criticize me, like they say, all men are equal, Maraga and I are equal. So let's be clear on that. Number two, the truth of the matter is she has admitted that suspending or sending Parliament home is not a solution. The solution is this. The solution is a referendum to add a clause on how to actually implement the two-thirds gender rule. Because even if you force political parties to put women on the ticket so that we meet a third, which political party will, in their right stance, take a weak man or a weak woman in a constituency to run against a strong man or woman? So democratically, that cannot work. Let's be logical, people. You can be emotional and take it as Tanga Tanga Jubilee politics, but it's not. It is impractical what we are trying to do. You cannot say I'm trying to cure a headache by hitting my head on the wall, I'll feel better. That's nonsensical. Let's be practical about it. This can only be solved by a referendum, and that referendum either goes mixed member representation or add the number of possible nominated people within Parliament. It is a referendum.
All right.
No matter how you think about it.
No matter how we look at it. And allow me to move us to something else, because I know we can continue debating this for a while, and we shall continue as we wait for the courts to decide. But there's also the question of education. Gloria, do you feel that schools are ready to be opened in October? According to the Ministry of Health, the numbers seem to be coming down, but we're not yet out of the woods. Would you be comfortable to have the schools open and have your children go to school?
I think that closing the schools without a proper plan of how we are going to have business continue in that education sector was a wrong move. And so what you're seeing now is that we are stuck because we never really had a plan. We never had a resiliency plan. We never had a crisis management team that is made up of doers. We had a committee of people sitting together and drinking tea and not really actioning the advices from the stakeholders. So in terms of going back to school, I think if our children are not going to die of COVID-19, at least I can speak very strongly about our teenagers and what is happening in the spaces from March up until now, with all the teenage pregnancies that are going on, with all the abuse of alcohol and substance abuse, with all the, I mean, we are simply protecting our children from one crisis and then engaging them into a multiple of other issues that instead of dealing with what we have now, we have a pandemic, we've had it for so long, we should have had a resiliency plan, we should have business continuity in all the sectors, not only in the school, in the bars, the entertainment, our art, in all the places that have been shut down. We should be reopening the economy and putting up stopgap measures.
All right, Gloria, I think I've got your point on that. David Osiani, very briefly, your thoughts as we are winding up on whether schools are ready to be opened.
I need to quickly first fault Gloria's notion that government officers are people who just sit to drink tea and not take advice and don't have pathways forward. That is wrong. There are honorable men and women out here who are doing so great in this country, who are engines of this country, but may not be on your screen every day. So Gloria owes those people an apology. However, there has been a bit of an inconsistency in communicating the pathway, the right way forward on this issue. Do I think it is time for our kids to go back to school? The answer would be yes and no. The thing is, we look forward to what President Kenyatta, based on the advice of the Ministry of Health, will communicate to the country on Tuesday next week. We want to see the logic of the scientists in explaining why and how we have flattened the curve. After all, it seems that Kenyans have decided to get out there and attend rallies. So why not have our children in schools?
All right.
But we also have to know that you have to have put in place systems, protocols, and guidelines that will help our children to stay safe in school. Remember that my 2-year-old daughter will meet her friend in the playpen and just play along,
And play
hold
along.
each other, hug. You know, the risks are there. So if there is going to be a clear communication of how this is going to be achieved based on science, then I support the reopening.
All right, we are out of time, and we'll have to wind up right there. Mark has not. I know, Gloria. You still wanted to give a rebuttal. Mark has not even given his comments on that. So kindly allow us to finish because we need to pay some bills. And I'll take this opportunity to thank you for joining us, Gloria Oroba, who's a youth policy analyst, Mark Bichachi, a political strategist, and David Osiani, a governance consultant. That's where we wind up the Week in Review. We take a break, but do stay with us. We've got entertainment, news, and celebrity chat with Brian Aseli coming up right here on Morning Express.